Hey guys, our friend Marshall Kosloff, he's going to be conducting interviews with experts and newsmakers for us here on the Breaking Points channel. We're really excited.
Yep, here it is.
Hey, Breaking Points. I'm joined by Zach Graumann. You probably know Zach because he was the campaign manager for Andrew Yang in 2020. He also co-hosts the podcast Forward with Andrew. So lots of great stuff that you've probably all seen before. He has a new book out today. It's called Long Shot: How Political Nobodies Took Andrew Yang National, and the new playbook that let us build a movement. Welcome to Breaking Points, Zach.
Thanks for having me, Marshall. What's going on?
Nothing much other than launching your really great book that I really unironically enjoyed. Saagar and I did a great episode of The Realignment with you that's actually coming out today too. So if you guys like this conversation, go check that out as well. I want to start here. A lot of folks who are interested in this type of story are going to feel kind of pessimistic. I mean, we know how this ends. Andrew doesn't end up winning. So let's just start with a dose of optimism for people who are trying to change the political system.
I love that. Like, dude, you didn't win or come particularly close. You got a book. Like, what's going on? The point of the book is it's actually not really about Andrew Yang. It follows the story, but the point of the book is actually about something much bigger than Andrew. And that's that this game has changed. And the reason this matters is because Andrew was completely anonymous with a campaign with no political experience and with a campaign team who was equally as anonymous and inexperienced, right? Like combined years of experience on our initial team was essentially zero. But we played a game to compete in today's attention economy. And it's a game that a lot of our politicians don't understand. And the traditional game, while it still exists, isn't the same as it once was. And those power players and those kind of gatekeepers of power in our political landscape have shifted a lot, and we use those to our advantage. So the point of the book is not only what we did and why it matters, but also how folks, frankly, competing in anything, whether it's marketing and business or running for office, can use those to their advantage in the 21st century.
I want to start with a counterintuitive one. Madison Cawthorn, I think he thought he was playing a new version of the game. He only hired comm staffers. He didn't hire policy people. He was going to message, and he was just defeated in a Republican primary last week. We covered this on the show. I'm curious, let's focus on what happens when people think they're remaking the game when actually they're just kind of digging themselves into a ditch.
That's a really good question. I think the one of the things we talk about in the book is having what's called an identity brand where folks can identify with you. So instead of like your traditional, I'm a politician brand and I toe the party line on this, you create something where folks can feel that personal connection to you. So for Andrew, it was whether it was a math hat or not wearing a tie or universal basic income or being very focused on logic or future oriented, right? That allows folks to authentically connect with you. And that's the key word is authenticity overall. There is a limit to authenticity. Trump hasn't found it yet, I don't think. But I think if you're not Donald Trump, there are certain candidates where you put enough baggage on them and it stops becoming authentic and starts becoming a clown show. And that's the line that I think politicians have to toe. We had to toe it as well, right? We got more press. Like we would do a tour in South Carolina on the 2020 race and you'd have big crowds and you'd have plenty of people showing up and stuff that a normal traditional candidate would do. And we'd get zero coverage, but Andrew would do the Cupid shuffle at a jazzercise class and that would go viral. So it's that line, right? And so I think Madison had a lot of, let's call it other baggage around him in that race, probably is the point where it went past authentic and his own level of authenticity to the point where I actually don't trust you. And you seem to be just doing things for the car crash media style. So that's my sense of that. But all these races, you ask somebody on the ground, they're going to tell you even a different game there too. But that's the line I would toe if I was trying to be a candidate today.
And when you talk about identity branding, obviously Andrew focused on UBI. That's how most people first heard of him. So it wasn't as if he was just cynically saying, I'm going to Cupid shuffle, and then you'll be making me a powerful politician person. He started with substance. How do you advise folks? I know people are screaming in the comments here. I don't care about Cupid shuffles. I don't care whether a person has a tie or wears shorts like John Fetterman. I want them to be real and actually do things because there are a lot of problems in this country. How do you balance those two things?
So one of the things I mentioned the attention economy earlier, and that was the big thing we realized quickly is that it was a big learning early on because we started in 2018. So we're talking about running for president in 2020, a year or so before the midterm election. Nobody cared. Our own supporters didn't care. So we just wandered around along in kind of like this anonymous grind, and no one cared about anything. And one of the things we learned is that you're not just competing against the other candidates in your race. Like for us, we weren't just competing against Bernie, Warren, and Biden, the usual suspects. We were also competing against HBO's newest hit and the Kardashians and Taylor Swift's new song and whatever your friends texting you on certain things, whatever else is taking your time and attention, who's weighing on you and competing for your attention. And that's the attention economy, where everything is around your eyeballs and what you care about. And so I write in the book, and if you want to get, you have two options really to compete and cut through the noise here. It's volume and relevance. So we're all used to volume, where it's Target beats us over the head with 10 emails a day on a certain sale they're having, right? Or you'll see 100 ads for Napa Know-How during March Madness or whatever you're talking. And that takes a lot of money. We had no money. So the other one is relevance, which is finding ways for individuals to find you relevant, forcing folks to care, because you'll cut through the noise if you give a crap about it. So the three things we have is creating a like us persona, finding your tribe, and letting them in. And that like us persona is what you're talking about, which is, the example, if I give you an example like Apple, like you say the word phrase like us in front of what you describe the company. So Apple is like us, you're cool, you're young, design conscious, or futuristic, right? If you're Target, like us, you're chic, you're smart, you're savvy. My mom considers herself a Target girl, right? She feels that like us connection. So for Andrew, trying to find what will people identify themselves with, and that can cut through the noise. So Andrew, for example, was like us. He was a visionary. He was smart. He was talking about things that mattered. He was non-traditional. He was solutions focused, optimistic, $1,000 a month. So that helped us understand what we were. And then when we found those who were passionate about that, when I say find, I mean, we threw everything at the wall and hope it stuck, right? So we tried MSNBC, that didn't work, but we went to podcasts, right? We tried the traditional politician events, but the Cupid Shuffle worked. Like, you're trying everything. And that's kind of the third point. As you find your tribe, you're doing everything you can to let them in. And that's where the creative aspect of it becomes. So look, the book isn't like, this is how you stand out in the attention economy. This is how you create and brand yourself and think about what you're doing in order to stand out in the attention economy. And ideally, it can work for all sorts of things.
It's funny. Logan Paul just said, I believe today or yesterday, that he plans on running for president in 2032. And you could obviously dunk on that for 15 different reasons. But when I hear the way you're describing this, if you are a celebrity, if you're an influencer, if you're a YouTuber, if you're performing in these ways, you are perfectly set up for this sort of style of politics that you're describing here, really having to cut through the attention there. So how do you see politicians, and this also explains Dr. Oz doing well in Pennsylvania, how are old style politicians going to try to catch up?
So it's this double-edged sword, right? Because the traditional gatekeepers, particularly on local races, are still strong, right? And then the new kind of 21st century gatekeepers are growing in power. So it all depends. So when I say traditional gatekeepers, you're talking about your mainstream media, your surrogates, your other politicians, your high-level endorsements, your big dollar donors, right, and the max checks and your bundlers, and then those large political consultants and campaign apparatuses. And on the other side, on the Yang 2020 campaign, we were using alternative media, social media, press, podcasts, things like that, YouTube shows. We used celebrities and influencers. We had small dollar grassroots donors. And then we had these kind of nimble campaign apparatuses run like a startup company we run. There is a balance, right? Like you've seen Caitlyn Jenner running for office and not lighting the world on fire over there is a good example. Like, name ID is one thing, but can you take if you're a YouTube influencer, do those people like you because you're attractive or talking about products they love, or do they like you enough to donate money to you, right? Do they like you enough to show up to a rally? Do they like you enough to register to vote? So this is the balance, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Ray McGuire, who ran for mayor in 2021 for New York City, it was Jay-Z, Nas, I think he had 3 big time rappers on a Zoom call, which is, you're getting Jay-Z in a local primary, like, the big deal. and it did nothing for him because that didn't turn into donations or like too much earned media or change the narrative for him. Right. And so that's the kind of like line you need to toe. The best politicians I see today are the ones that are able to toe this line. I think AOC, like whether you agree with her or not, she's able to both like drive, I'm not going to say legislation, but at least like conversation on legislation and prioritize what the party's talking about or should be talking about. And she's at the Met Gala pissing everybody off. She's able to toe this like influencer celebrity line. Now, not everybody's going to be AOC, and that's not the point. But the point is there is a way to look at how to be this kind of 21st century game changer, but also play with the traditional gatekeepers that still, they're lingering, like MSNBC and the New York Times, they're still swaying voters on the left. And I'm like Fox News and the various Republican establishment, powers that be are still swaying votes on the right. So that it's not all influencers yet. In 20 years, will it be? I'm not sure. But the book kind of talks about it is trending that direction.
Yeah. So like you said, this book isn't actually literally just about the campaign of Andrew, but we're in the year 2022, we're going to the midterms. A lot of folks are thinking about 2024. Like, what do you think the work, quote unquote, to be done is? Like, what should folks if you were just going to hop on a campaign in 2022, right this second, what do you think the first task, now that there are these initial steps that have been made clear, are?
Right. I mean, what's the through line here? Like, what are we seeing that's successful on both the left and the right? It's what I'm calling is that like us persona. What does that really mean? They're talking about stuff that voters, real people, not focus groups, not polls, real people actually care about. And that is different than what you're potentially seeing on TV from mainstream pundits. That's different than what's trending on Twitter at times. I think you could look at Fetterman in Pennsylvania, like you could split policy and that sort of thing, but a lot of people like that there was a masculine figure running as a Democrat, where we've kind of been avoiding that in some of those states, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania at times. I think so. It's what are voters reacting to and leaning into that, right? What do they actually care about? And I think some of the time the party will split hairs over mask mandates or vaccine requirements or that sort of thing. And the core underlying driver of what voters were upset about with that was not particularly whether they had to wear a mask at all times. It was the schools. It was how it was affecting their kids. It was that their local restaurant was closed and they couldn't get anything to eat. The small businesses that they supported were dead. That's the core. So the identity branding, let's call it framework, the goal of that is to get people to cut through that noise to where individuals actually identify with you. And the great new exciting politicians you're seeing right now, I think they do it better than anybody.
Last question.
Yeah.
There's a difficult dynamic here. You just said specifically, don't get stuck in the Twitter trending space, right? Don't get overly focused on those details. But, like you said at the top, best candidates are going to get and ride the attention economy wave. How do you ride that wave, but also not become captured by it? Because Twitter isn't real life, but you also have to win on Twitter.
And it feels like real life sometimes, right? I think I joked to you on the show, like Eric Adams had less Twitter followers than I did, and I'm not a huge Twitter guy, and he won, right? So the reality is these things are tools, and you need to understand them as tools, and they're not the campaign, or they're not the end all be all. If you have a bad tweet, it's not the end of the world because it's not real life. If you have a great tweet that goes viral, did it help you move money, press, polls, crowd sizes? Did it do any of those things? If it didn't, then it probably doesn't matter. So I think it's, one of the things I talk about in the book is great politicians and the great teams today, that the main thing is keep the main thing. Like they're focused on the prize. And I think, for us, and one of the big things in the 2020 race was getting on the debate stages. And one of the requirements was getting 65,000 individual donors. And the politicians that didn't prioritize that early on, they fell to the wayside fast. And you had some big names in that category. So I think because the main thing was to be legitimate on the debate stage as early as possible. So to me, the best groups and the best candidates are understanding that Twitter's a tool. It's not my campaign. Media is a tool. It's not my campaign. These endorsements are a tool. Getting one won't win the election for me, right? Like that sort of kind of bigger picture perspective.
Zach, really appreciate it. The book is long shot, and I really hope everyone in the Breaking Points audience, left, right, center, apolitical, political, checks it out. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.